Good morning, and thank you for being here and for the opportunity to deliver this lecture. Today I will talk about the Towianist documents at the Wroblewski library. Specifically, I will talk about Valentina Oreszkiewiczówna and the Turin-Vilnius connection. Before talking about Valentina Oreszkiewiczówna, I have to introduce the matter of the documents contained in Valentina Oreszkiewiczówna papers that are mainly that concern mainly Andrzej Towiański. So, who was Andrzej Towiański? Towiański was a judge, a counselor of the judicial of various Vilnius court. He was born in Antonsvince in 1799, and after the studies at the University of Vilnius, in 1825 to 1832, he began his judicial career. On the 11th of May 1828, he had a divine revelation at the Bernardine Church of Vilnius. Unfortunately, we don't know what happened in this divine revelation that is claimed to be a Marian apparition. But Towiański, after that event, decided to change his life. Another focal point for Towiański's life was in the 27th of September 1841 in Notre-Dame de Paris, when he decided to reveal the content of this apparition, so the announcement of the cause of God. I translate it as the cause of God, while usually in Polish is called Sprawę Bożej, while in French œuvre de Dieu. So what were the contents of this apparition and the divine illumination he claimed to have received? The opening of what he called the higher Christian epoch, a new spiritual epoch that will forerun the kingdom of God. So, what were the messages contained in Towiański's doctrine? Towiański's, besides the coming of the higher Christian epoch, preached a particular metempsychosis that consisted in interaction between columns of darkness and light that will guide the souls towards a future existence that could be easier or difficult according to the past life, the temporality of hell's punishment that will guide the soul over the centuries in his progressive purification, the triple sacrifice that was a practice that helped his disciples to attract the power of God, live according with it, and externalize it into the society, and the existence of the Magister nations. So certain nations, which he identified in France, Slavdom, Israel, and later also Italy, that were chosen by God to guide humanity into the new epoch. So we said who was Towiański and what he preached, but in order to understand the diffusion of his doctrine, we have to talk about his travels and his actual preaching. So how can we see from this map? After the divine illumination at the Bernardine Church, and after he resigned as consular of the Supreme Court of Vilnius, Towiański traveled first to St. Petersburg in 1832, but he was expelled in the same year. After he came back to Lithuania, decided a few years ago, in 1836, to travel in the German Confederation, passing through Warsaw. So we can see that Towiański presence was in Bohemia, Dresden, and Munich and Vienna. After that, he had to come back to Vilnius because his father deceased and he had to manage his estates. Until in 1839, he received another divine illumination that encouraged him to leave everything and move to Paris. As we can see in the map, dark blue lines, Towiański didn't reach immediately Paris, but he moved according to the Napoleonic battlefields and also visited the British Island before taking his residence in Paris. He stayed there until 1842, when Mickiewicz delivered lectures at the Collège de France on Towiański's message. The government decided, presumably supported by the Russian authorities in the city, to expel Towiański, who repaired in Brussels. Nonetheless, Towiański wanted to deliver his message, this divine revelation, to the Pope. Therefore, Towiański moved to Rome in October 1843. However, he stayed there for less than 1 month, because the Roman authorities expelled him. After the Roman expulsions, he went to Basel in Switzerland until on the Revolution of February of 1848 he would be able to come back again in Paris to reunite to the circle of disciples that he had there. But on the June 1848, after the so-called June Days happened, Towiański was arrested, accused of revolutionary activity, and only in 1849 he will be released after a long process that asked also for his expatriation in the French Caribbean island. In 1849 he wanted to go back in Rome to meet the Pope that at the time was elected Pius IX. But in the same month the Roman Republic was proclaimed and the Pope left for the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies. Being unable to meet the Pope, Towiański decided to move back to Switzerland, precisely in Zurich, when he stayed there until his death. So, where Towiański moved, where Towiański resided, he was able to attract disciples and people interested in his message. So we can see various Towianist cycles in Europe, especially the first in Vilnius with his first disciples, then one in St. Petersburg. In Poland there are identified mainly circles in Kielce, Warsaw, Krakow. In France, Towianist influence can be seen in Paris and Mulhouse, but also in Marseille. In Switzerland, the main cities visited by Towiański were Basel, Zurich or Lausanne, while in Italy, Towiański had his main diffusion, and Towianist circles were present in Turin, Milan, Rome, even Naples for some times. However, how can you see from this slide, the circles, certain circles had a beginning and end, while others is unclear when they dissolved. This because the Towianists moves themselves, and also because generation after generation the Towianists were moved to other cities, creating new circles and coming back to other circles, so it's still unclear how the Towianist presence was stable in Europe, especially where and for how long. Here we can see the diffusion and the intellectual milieu of this Towianist diffusion. I decided to divide this diffusion in 3 phases. So a first one from 1828 to 1840 that I call the Lithuanian period, where the Towianist circle was mainly present in Vilnius, and we have some movements in St. Petersburg and the German Confederation. Then the period of the voluntary exile of Towiański from 1840 to 1878, which is the death of Towiański in Zurich, that the Towianist community were present in various places in France, Belgium, Switzerland, Italian peninsula, and the German regions of Hesse and Palatinate. And then, after Towiański's death, the Italian circles of his disciples took the lead of the Towianist movement, and we can see a major diffusion both in Italy and in Poland, because many Towiański disciples decided to go back to Poland already before the First World War. And those intellectual milieu initially, especially in the first decades of the 19th century, were closed to literary clubs, patriotic clubs, and Freemason lodges, while in the middle of the 19th century they were mainly in touch with various patriotic revolutionary cells scattered around Europe, other religious reformators, even spiritist societies, while in the last years of the 19th century and the first decades of the 20th century, they were closed, or get the interest of occultist milieu, persons close to the Catholic modernist movement, and also the so-called neo-messianist movement, especially in Poland. Since those circles were present around Europe, the Towianists were also active in preaching Towiański's message, and also trying to diffuse it through publications. So here I also identified three main periods. One from the revolution at 1848 to the 1864, another one from the 1857 to 1928, and another one 1897 to 1938, according to those periods according to the place of publications. The most important thing to underline is that Towiański never published anything in first person, and the Towianist publications were usually published by his disciples, and they often contained Towiański's words. So we see these main places are Paris initially, where the Towianist community resided, then in Italy on the circle of Turin, and then in Rome, while in Poland, especially in the 20th century, in Warsaw and Vilnius. Why Warsaw and Vilnius? Because in the first decades of the 20th century, Towianism became also a subject of studies for certain academics. And how can you see from the arrows, there were travels to publish those works, but also relations between first the Towianist circles, and second also the Towianist scholars. So documentation was traveling in Europe, and also persons were traveling in Europe testifying Towiański's message. So what is the status questionis on Towianism? We have several sources. So first, in the middle of the 19th century, we can find mention of Towianism in French and Polish newspapers, and also in French and Polish social-religious studies, while after the death of Towiański, the first Towianist publications, usually published by his Italian disciples, appeared, which are hagiographic publications, since they describe Towiański and Towiański's message according to their narrative. While in the 20th century we can see a revival of Towianism, especially in Polish spiritist and occultist journals, while in the interwar period we have the first academic studies on Towianism, and also after the Second World War, while the new sources are mainly connected to Polish philology's study and also history, that are mainly promoted by scholars connected to the Polish academia. What are the research problems of this research? The first is that the Towianist community was an academic, so they not revealed Towiański's message and his doctrine to the others, but they were secret and behaved like normal Catholics. The second and most important concerning the documentation is that the Towianist community was not institutionalized. Therefore, it didn't have a structure and kind of records. Thus, the absence of bureaucracy in the Towianist community makes the reconstruction of the history of the Towianist movement and the procedures extremely difficult. According to the publication, the unavailability of original sources, the partial knowledge on Towiański's disciples, and led to a predominance of the Towianist narrative, which is hagiographic, while the studies based on the very available documentation and the spatial and the temporal extension of the movement led to a simple overview of the phenomenon, which was, however, biased by the Towianist narrative. So, what are the main Towianist sources and where we can find the Towianist archival collection? Here I wanted to list the main 4 Towianist archives. So, in Turin, there is the Beje archive in the Royal Library. In Krakow, the papers of Andrzej Towiański, while in Vilnius, here, at the Wroblewski library, there is the fund of Valentina Oreszkiewiczówna, and in Paris, at the Adam Mickiewicz Museums of the Polish Library in Paris, there is the so-called Section 5, which concern exclusively the papers related to Towiański and his disciples. And finally, we arrive to talk about Valentina Oreszkiewiczówna and the papers contained here. So, who was Valentina Oreszkiewiczówna? The information concerning her are not enough, but we can reconstruct part of her life. So, in 1913, she achieved a degree in Polish and German philology at the Jagiellonian University in Krakow. During the Great War, she performed a nursing service in Krakow and Denmark. Between 1999 and 1921, so just after the war, she became a university administrative officer in the University of first of Warsaw and then in Poznan. While from 1921, she moved to Vilnius and became the secretary of the Stefan Batory University. At the university, she began her PhD studies, and in 1938 her thesis Etica Towiańskiego was published. So why the Stefan Batory University and Valentina Oreszkiewiczówna were, I would say, important for the Towianist studies? Because at the Stefan Batory University, 3 professors get interested in the topic. The first, Marian Dziechowski, was a full professor and even rector of the university. The second, Wincenty Lutosławski, that was associate professors. And finally, Stanisław Pigon, one of the first main scholar of Towianism. He was a full professor and rector at the university. Those professors, through Valentina Oreszkiewiczówna, were in epistolary contact with the Italian Towianists. So those who preserved the Towianist documentation after Towiański's death. So the main important was Attilio Begei, Italian honorary consul of the Republic of Poland in Italy. His daughter, Maria Barsano Begei, who was professor of Polish philology at the University of Turin, who she studied at the Jagiellonian University in Krakow too, in obtaining a degree in Polish philology in the same years of Valentina Oreszkiewiczówna. Therefore, it is supposed that their friendship started there. And Andrea Fossombrone, a Dalmatian painter and sculptor that moved to Milan. Among other Towianist personalities, these were present also not only Italy but France and Poland too. But those three Towianists are the main correspondent of Valentina Oreszkiewiczówna, and we can find them also in the correspondence of the other professors. And now, in this slide, we can see the Towianist documents mobility. So, I wanted to list the two main passages which led first to the formation of the Begei archive in Turin, founded by Begei between 1890 and 1928, date of his death. Begei traveled all over Europe to gather the Towianist documentation, which was property of Towiański's disciples, to collect them in a single archive in Turin. On the other hand, the Oreszkiewiczówna Fund in Vilnius, created between 1911 and 1949, preserves the documents that were created after Begei's death, and also part of the Turinese collection, due to the interaction between the Italian Towianists and the professors of the Stefan Batory Universities. Valentina Oreszkiewiczówna, through Attilio Begei and his daughter, copied and moved the documents present in Turin to Vilnius. But then the Second World War happened, so several original Towianist documents are still here in Vilnius, preserved in her fund. Thus, here in Vilnius, at the Wroblewski Library, are contained around 1,000 and few hundreds documents in Valentina Oreszkiewiczówna fund that concern, apart from her life, also the history of Towianism. And at the moment, only a few scholars consulted them. But what it is important, in my opinion, is that this fund is created and preserves numerous documents that can be found only here. Every archive has certainly documents that can be found only there, but the example of this connection between Turin and Vilnius shows how not only intellectual milieus were in contact between each other, but also the traveling of documentations that was both original and manuscript copies. And the papers contained here can prove, partially at least, the existence of the Towianist movement even after the death of the leader of the Italian Towianist circle, Attilio Begei, and during the middle of the 20th century. and moreover to show the academic interest in Towianist by various professors and even expand our knowledge on the diffusion of this movement when it was no longer publicly active but still alive. Thank you.